8 days, no power, no heat, no running water. This Wisconsin family learned the hard way what happens when modern life suddenly stops. But they survived, and what they learned could save your family when disaster strikes. In this video, you'll discover the exact 10 items that got them through one of Wisconsin's worst power outages in history. Whether you face blizzards, hurricanes, or blackouts, these lessons will help you prepare for the unexpected before it's too late. Stick around until the end because items 2 and 10 are the ones most people forget, and they could make all the difference. Welcome to Food Decider, where we help you make smart decisions about food, survival, and everything that keeps your family safe and thriving. If you find this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss life-saving information like this. It was April in northeast Wisconsin. Spring should have been arriving, but instead, a massive storm rolled through with heavy, wet snow that clung to everything it touched. Within hours, the region was plunged into darkness. At first, this family thought it would be like any other power outage, annoying but temporary. In their rural area, brief outages were common. They expected the lights to flicker back on by morning. But morning came and nothing changed. Then another day passed, and another. When the power company finally made an announcement, the news was devastating. 80% or more of the utility poles in the area had snapped under the weight of the snow. The entire infrastructure needed extensive repairs. This wasn't going to be fixed quickly. That's when reality set in. This was no ordinary outage. The basics of modern life, lights, heat, running water, were suddenly pawn, and they had no idea when they'd come back. Within the first few hours, their well pump stopped working. In rural areas, most homes rely on wells, and those pumps need electricity. The water pressure in the lines lasted a little while, but once it ran out, that was it. No more water coming out of the taps, no showers, no washing hands, and worst of all, no way to flush the toilets. Their propane heating system was useless too. Even though they had plenty of propane, the system needed electricity to run the controls and fans. The house started getting colder by the hour. With spring temperatures in the Midwest still dipping below freezing at night, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. They were left with only what they had on hand and what they could quickly get their hands on. And that's when the scramble began. The very first thing they needed was water. This family had always prided themselves on being environmentally conscious. They used refillable water bottles, avoided single-use plastics, and did their part to reduce waste. But when the tap runs dry, those ideals disappear fast. Bottled water became their lifeline. They needed it for drinking, obviously, but also for cooking and basic hygiene. Without running water, even brushing teeth or washing hands required bottled water. They had a small supply at home, but it wasn't nearly enough. Stores in the area were quickly running low, and panic buying was setting in. Looking back, they realized how irresponsible it had been not to keep an emergency supply. Now they always have cases of bottled water stored, not because they've abandoned their environmental values, but because in an emergency, practicality trumps ideology every single time. They keep enough for the whole family and even their animals, recognizing that water is the #1 priority in any crisis. While water was critical, they quickly realized that surviving 8 days would require more than just hydration. They needed power, and that meant they needed a generator. By the time they decided to get one, local stores had already sold out. Everyone had the same idea, and generators disappeared from shelves within the first 24 hours. Her husband started calling stores in surrounding towns, driving farther and farther from home. Finally, he found one store 2 hours away that had a single generator left and agreed to hold it for them. He drove through hazardous road conditions to get it. The storm had left ice and debris everywhere, and the trip was risky, but it was worth it. Once they got that generator home and hooked it up, everything changed. Suddenly, they could run the furnace. They could power a few lights. They could keep one bathroom functional. Life became manageable again. The generator didn't just help them, it helped their neighbors too. They opened their homes so people could charge their phones, get updates from the power company, and access water. In small communities, sharing resources isn't just nice, it's essential for survival. After the power came back on, they didn't just put the generator away and forget about it. They bought a second one as a backup, because they learned that generators aren't a luxury. They're critical infrastructure for maintaining warmth, safety, food storage, and communication during an extended outage. Even with the generator running, they couldn't power the entire house. They had to make choices, and one of the first priorities was heat. The temperatures outside were dropping into the 20s at night, and even with the generator cycling the furnace periodically, they needed supplemental heat sources. That's where portable propane heaters came in. They had 2 types, a Sunlight heater that attached to a standard propane tank, and a Buddy heater that ran on those small green propane canisters. These devices became lifesavers. They set them up in the main living area where the family spent most of their time, and those heaters kept the space warm enough to be comfortable. In the Midwest, spring storms can still bring brutal cold, and without reliable heat sources, hypothermia becomes a real danger, especially for children and elderly family members. These propane heaters bridged the gap when the generator was powering other essentials like the water heater or refrigerator. Now they keep extra propane tanks and canisters stocked year-round. Heat isn't negotiable when you're facing freezing temperatures and no power. Beyond warmth and water, there was another basic need that became urgent: food. Specifically, the ability to cook hot food. For the first day and a half, they survived on cold sandwiches, crackers, and whatever snacks were in the pantry. It wasn't enough to keep hunger at bay, but morale was dropping fast. Everything changed when they got their camp stove set up. Suddenly, they could make hot meals. Coffee in the morning, warm soup for lunch, a hot dinner that actually felt like dinner. It sounds simple, but in the middle of a crisis, a hot meal does more than fill your stomach. It lifts your spirits. It gives you something to look forward to. It makes everything feel a little less hopeless. They used a standard 2-burner camp stove powered by small propane canisters. Simple, portable, and effective. Now they keep multiple cooking options on hand: the camp stove, a propane grill, and even a backup single-burner stove. Because when you can't use your kitchen, having alternatives isn't just convenient, it's essential. Of course, cooking without electricity meant adapting their cookware too. And that's where cast iron became invaluable. Cast iron pans are incredibly versatile. You can use them on a camp stove, on a grill, or even over an open fire if it comes to that. But the real advantage during the outage was how easy they are to clean with limited water. Normally, washing dishes requires running water, soap, and scrubbing. But when water is scarce, that's not an option. With cast iron, you can simply wipe it out with a paper towel or cloth. A little oil to season it, and it's ready for the next meal. No need to waste precious water on washing. They cooked everything in those pans: eggs, pasta, canned soups, even baked goods. Cast iron held up to the rough conditions of emergency cooking, and it made cooking so much easier when resources were tight. Now they keep multiple cast iron pieces in different sizes, knowing that if disaster strikes again, these pans will be workhorses. But even with the ability to cook, they needed food that was easy to prepare and didn't require much effort. That's where convenience foods and MREs came in. MREs, meals ready to eat, are military-style rations that come with everything you need, including a chemical heater that warms the food without any external heat source. Before they had the generator and camp stove fully operational, MREs were a godsend. They could have a hot meal in minutes without any setup. Just activate the heater, wait a few minutes, and eat. No dishes, no cleanup, no hassle. Beyond MREs, they relied heavily on shelf-stable foods: canned soups, ravioli, crackers, peanut butter, granola bars. These items required minimal preparation and could be eaten cold if necessary. When you're juggling limited power, trying to stay warm, and managing stress, the last thing you want is complicated cooking. Nutrition and culinary standards go out the window in an emergency. The goal is simple: keep everyone fed with as little effort as possible. Now they keep a dedicated stash of MREs and convenience foods specifically for emergencies, rotating them out as expiration dates approach. In those first 48 hours before the generator arrived, staying warm was a constant battle. That's when hot hand warmers became essential. These small packets, which activate when you open them and stay hot for up to 10 hours, provided personal heat that made all the difference. They tucked them into socks, slipped them into coat pockets, wrapped them in blankets, and even put them in sleeping bags at night. For the kids especially, those hand warmers prevented shivering and helped them sleep. When you're trying to conserve generator fuel and limit propane heater use, personal warmth solutions like this become critical. Hot hand warmers are cheap, they don't require power, and they're compact enough to store in bulk. Now this family buys them by the case, keeping dozens on hand for the next emergency. It's a small investment that provides massive comfort when you need it most. Even with the camp stove and cast iron pans, there was still the problem of dishes. Normally, cooking means washing plates, bowls, utensils, and cookware afterward. But with water in short supply, washing dishes wasn't realistic. Every drop of water had to be rationed for drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene. That's when they discovered the value of something they previously avoided: disposable plates and utensils. They happened to have a stash left over from parties and holidays: paper plates, plastic forks, napkins, and cups. Suddenly, those items weren't wasteful, they were practical. Using disposables eliminated the need for dishwashing entirely. After a meal, they could just toss everything and move on. This might seem minor, but in a high-stress situation, when you're managing heat, water, cooking, and safety, eliminating even one chore makes a huge difference. It reduced the mental load and freed up water for more critical needs. Now they keep a dedicated tote full of paper plates, plastic utensils, napkins, and cups specifically for emergencies. When disaster strikes, practicality wins over environmental concerns every time. Food preservation was another major challenge. Without power, freezers and refrigerators stop working and food spoils fast. Many families in the area lost everything. Hundreds of dollars worth of meat, frozen vegetables, and prepared meals, all ruined. But this family got lucky. They had chest freezers in their cold basement, and those held their temperature remarkably well.
Chest freezers are better at retaining cold than upright models because cold air sinks and stays trapped when the lid is closed. They kept the freezer shut as much as possible, only opening them when absolutely necessary. The cold weather helped too. When some items started to thaw, they moved them to a garage freezer, which stayed cold thanks to the outdoor temperatures. It was a makeshift solution, but it worked. Looking back, they realized that chest freezers are a smarter choice for emergency preparedness than upright freezers. If you're stocking up on food for your family, investing in a chest freezer gives you a better chance of preserving that food during an extended outage. Throughout the entire ordeal, one of the most stressful aspects was the lack of information. How long would the outage last? Were crews making progress? Were there resources available? Shelters, hot meals, showers? Without power, getting answers was nearly impossible. That's where power banks became essential. Keeping phones charged meant they could receive updates from the power company, coordinate with family members, and reach out for help if needed. The generator helped, but it wasn't always running, and they needed to conserve fuel. Power banks bridged the gap, allowing them to charge phones and tablets without running the generator constantly. They had a couple of power banks on hand, but they quickly realized they needed more. Now, they keep multiple high-capacity power banks fully charged at all times, along with charging cables for every device in the house. Communication is critical in a crisis, and a dead phone can cut you off from vital information and support. But even with power banks, there was a problem. Cell service was unreliable. Towers were down or overloaded, and sometimes they couldn't get a signal at all. That's when a device they'd almost forgotten about became a lifeline, a battery-powered radio. This simple, old-school tool provided updates on the outage, safety information, and news about resources in the area. They learned about safe haven centers offering hot meals and showers, heard about road conditions, and got estimates on when power might be restored. More importantly, hearing that other families were going through the same thing was reassuring. They weren't alone. The radio also worked when nothing else did. No internet required, no cell towers, no infrastructure, just batteries and airwaves. It kept them connected to the outside world when everything else failed. This is the item most people forget. In an age of smartphones and streaming, a battery-powered radio seems outdated. But in a real emergency, it can be your most reliable source of information. Now, they keep a radio in their emergency kit, along with spare batteries, and they test it regularly to make sure it works. One of the most unexpected parts of the experience was how the community came together. In small towns, mutual aid isn't just a concept, it's a way of life. This family opened their home to neighbors who needed help. People came to charge phones, take showers, fill water containers, and get warm for a little while. Sharing resources made the ordeal more bearable for everyone. They weren't just surviving individually, they were surviving collectively. Neighbors helped each other find supplies, shared information about where to get generators or propane, and checked on elderly or vulnerable community members. This sense of community reminded them that preparedness isn't just about stockpiling supplies. It's about building relationships. Knowing your neighbors before disaster strikes means you have a support network when things go wrong. You can pool resources, share skills, and look out for each other. Now, they make it a point to stay connected with their neighbors and discuss emergency plans. They know who has medical needs, who has extra space, who has tools or skills that might be useful. That social infrastructure is just as important as physical supplies. Living through 8 days without power fundamentally changed this family's mindset. They used to think emergency preparedness was something for survivalists or people living in fear. But now they see it differently. Preparedness isn't about paranoia, it's about responsibility. After the power came back on, they didn't just breathe a sigh of relief and move on. They made changes. They built a comprehensive emergency kit and committed to maintaining it year-round. Here's what they always keep on hand now. Bottled water for the entire family and their animals, at least 1 gallon per person per day, with enough for several days. 2 generators with fresh fuel and proper maintenance. They test them regularly to make sure they'll run when needed. Propane heaters with extra tanks and canisters. Heat is non-negotiable in cold climates. Non-electric cooking options, camp stoves, grills, and backup burners. Shelf-stable convenience foods and MREs. Easy to prepare, long-lasting, and filling. Hot hand warmers purchased in bulk, small, cheap, and incredibly effective. Paper plates, plastic utensils, and disposable items stored in a dedicated tote, ready to go when water is scarce. Multiple power banks, fully charged and regularly rotated. Communication is critical in a crisis. And battery-powered radios with spare batteries, the most reliable source of information when everything else fails.
Snowstorms in Wisconsin, hurricanes on the coast, wildfires in the west, floods in the Midwest. Every region faces risks. Being prepared isn't about living in fear. It's about facing reality with confidence. It's about protecting the people you love and being ready when the unexpected happens. So what can you do right now to prepare? Start by assessing the risks in your area. What disasters are most likely where you live? Tailor your emergency kit to your climate and local hazards. If you're in a cold climate, prioritize heat sources and warm clothing. If you're in a hurricane zone, focus on water, food, and evacuation plans. Build your supply kit gradually. Start with the essentials: water, food, heat, cooking, warmth, power, and communication. You don't have to buy everything at once. Add a few items each month until you have a complete kit. Maintain your supplies. Check expiration dates on food and batteries. Rotate water supplies and ensure fuel is fresh. Test generators and heaters to make sure they're in working order. A supply kit that sits in a closet for years without maintenance won't help you when you need it. Plan for community support. Get to know your neighbors. Discuss emergency plans. Share resources and skills. In a crisis, mutual aid can make all the difference. And finally, practice your plan. Conduct drills with your family. Make sure everyone knows how to use emergency equipment and where supplies are stored. Try cooking without electricity for a day. Practice managing water use. The more familiar you are with your emergency procedures, the calmer and more effective you'll be when a real crisis hits. Emergencies are stressful. There's no way around that. When basic needs are threatened, anxiety spikes. But you can manage that stress by simplifying your approach. Focus on warmth, safety, and keeping everyone fed. Accept that your standards will shift temporarily. You're not going to have gourmet meals or perfectly clean dishes. That's okay. The goal is survival and stability, not perfection. Children are especially vulnerable during crises. Keep routines as normal as possible. Provide warm meals. Ensure comfort. Involve them in simple tasks so they feel like they're contributing. These small actions help children feel secure even when everything else is uncertain. Stay connected to the outside world. Use radios, phones, and community networks to stay informed. Share experiences and resources. Isolation makes emergencies harder. Connection builds resilience. This Wisconsin family's experience taught them that preparedness is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you live in a city or the country, if you're young or old, if you're wealthy or struggling. Everyone should be ready for the unexpected. The 10 items that got them through those 8 days are now staples in their home. Bottled water, generators, propane heaters, camp stoves, cast iron pans, convenience foods and MREs, hot hand warmers, paper plates and utensils, power banks, and battery-powered radios. These aren't luxury items. They're practical tools that can protect your family when disaster strikes. Start small, build your kit, and remember, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. By sharing these lessons, this family hopes to encourage you to take preparedness seriously, not out of fear, but out of care for the people you love. Whether it's a snowstorm, a hurricane, or a blackout, being ready means facing challenges with confidence and compassion. So here's your challenge. Look at that list of 10 items again. How many do you already have? What's missing? Pick one thing this week, just one, and add it to your emergency kit. Next week, add another. Little by little, you'll build the foundation of preparedness that could save your family when it matters most. Which of these 10 items do you already have at home? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this information valuable, hit that like button and subscribe to Food Decider. We're here to help you make smart decisions about food, survival, and everything that keeps your family safe. Stay prepared, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.